Many of us in this place today, you are looking to hear from God. You are looking to hear from God because you have a big prayer request and you're just waiting for it to be answered. Some of you guys are waiting to hear from God because, you're looking for purpose for your life, but you are simply just working a job and you're like, man, I get a job and I get a paycheck, but I'm really looking for something that gives me fulfillment. Maybe you guys are waiting to hear from God because you are wrestling with doubt, anxiety, you're questioning your faith, and you're saying, God, I need to hear from you. Otherwise, my faith is just going to erode. Many of us are in this place today waiting to hear from God, and we don't know how. Waiting to hear from God. And so over this next series, we're going to be looking about how to hear from God. And some of us do funny things to try to hear from God. How many of you guys have done like the, all right, God, if you're there, just say something. Oh, I totally do that all the time. Just to see what happens, right? Some of us do like I was just talking to one of my friends, and he said he was driving his car, and he said, God, I have so much faith, I'm going to just give you the wheel. And then he took his hands off the wheel. And then on 101, his car starts drifting, and he says, I don't have enough faith. And he grabs his steering wheel, and he said, Pastor Josh, does that mean I don't have enough faith? I'm like, no, dude, that means you're stupid. We do funny things sometimes when we really, really want to hear from God. One of my favorite stories is Eric. He was a longtime pastor here, and now he's going overseas to do some missions work. And he was telling me a story about one of his college roommates, is one of his friends, and every day he would go to his room in his dorm, and he'd open up his window and he'd start praying. God, I pray that revival would fall on Vanguard University. God, I pray that that people would be moved by your Spirit. And then he always ended this prayer session. Of course, the window was open, so everyone could hear as they were walking past the dorms. He would end his prayer session with, "And God, I pray that you would give me a wife, a faithful wife, a Proverbs 31 wife. God, oh, just send her to me." And this would happen day after day after day. This guy just praying that a wife would find him. Well, this guy's roommates decided they were going to play a little trick on this guy. And so, of course, they knew his procedure, they knew his repetition of his prayer, and so they were waiting for him to get to that point, and they were on the floor up with a blowhorn. And they were just waiting for the moment. And when he said, God, and give me a wife! And then the blowhorn goes on. This is God. Marry Stephanie. And the guys walked away and they're like, sucker. Well, it turns out this guy of much faith goes and he actually finds a girl named Stephanie at college, and they ended up getting married, and now they're happily lived ever after. Crazy, right? Crazy, right? Man, we do funny stuff when we really, really want to hear from God. And you and I, we're no exception. And so today we're going to be learning a little bit about how to hear from God and really what's our responsibility in this dialogue. And so we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 1 today. And over the course of these next 6 or 8 weeks, we're just going to be crawling through 1 Samuel. If you open up your Bibles, it's going to be in the first half of your Bible. The verses are also going to be up on the screen. Or if you have the Bible app, you can open that up as well. And this takes First Samuel takes place in ancient Israel. This is at a time before the kings, before King David or King Saul. Samuel was one of the last prophets and one of the last judges of Israel during this era. And so we're going to be learning about a boy who heard from God, but specifically how he ended up doing so. So we're going to start off in verse 1, and it starts off like this. There was this man named Elkanah who lived in Ramah in the region of Zuith, in the hill region of Ephraim. He was the son of Joam, and the son of Elihu, son of Tohu, and son of Zup, and of Ephraim. I practiced all those names just for you. Elkanah had 2 wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah did not. Oftentimes in Hebrew scripture, you're going to be reading about how there is someone that has multiple wives. In Hebrew scripture, it is not uncommon for someone to have multiple wives, though it is not condoned. And so there are many individuals that have multiple wives. In the New Testament, you should only have one wife. And so this isn't an excuse for you to go out and get another wife. In fact, each one of these stories of someone that has multiple wives, there's always problems in the marriage. There's always problems that end up happening. And so dudes, right now, I just want to let you know, have one wife. Just have one. And I'm not even just talking about wife, okay? Have one lady, okay? Don't do this like little side thing over here, this little sideshow. It always ends up bad. It always ends up bad, dudes. And so here we have another story of a dude with two wives, and it ends up not working out maybe how he originally wanted it to. And so in verse 3, each year Elkanah would travel to Shiloh to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord of heaven's armies at the tabernacle. This is in Jerusalem. The priests of the Lord of that time were two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas. On the days Elkanah presented his sacrifice, he would give portions of meat to Phinehas and to each of her children, which means that she would be getting more portions of meat of sacrifice. Although he loved Hannah, he would give her only a choice portion because the Lord had given her no children. So Phinehas would taunt Hannah and make fun of her because the Lord had kept her from having children. Year after year, it was the same. Phinehas would taunt Hannah, and as they went to the tabernacle. And each time, Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. "Why are you crying, Hannah?" Elkanah would ask. "Why aren't you eating? Why are you so downtrodden just because you have no children? You have me. Isn't that better than having 10 sons? Okay, once again, dudes, let me just stop you right here. This is not a proper answer when a woman is in turmoil and grief. Why are you so sad? You have me, babe. Aren't I enough? Not the right answer to have for your lady. Not the right answer to have. Now imagine for me, for a moment, as we're reading this story, maybe this is the first time that you've read this story, but if you were reading this story as an Israeli boy, you're reading these words, and this story structure seems very, very familiar. In fact, this is a very similar predicament that Hannah's great ancestors had, that she had within this moment. And this is why this particular setup of the story is really important. See, Hannah was being taunted for something that she couldn't control. What could she not control? She couldn't have a baby. Well, Hannah's ancestors also did some funny things when they were infertile and couldn't have children, and so they found themselves at a brink of stress, and so they made bad decisions. Sarah was Abraham's wife. Maybe you've heard of Abraham. Abraham was the first, Israelite that God called out and said, "You will be my, out of you, you have as many descendants as the stars up into the sky." And he says, "Out of you, we are going to have lots and lots of children and lots of babies." Well, that's a lot of pressure to put on Sarah because Sarah was infertile. And so Sarah, hearing this promise, got really stressed out, and they kept on trying, but they couldn't have any babies. And so Sarah goes to her maidservant and says, "Why don't you have a baby in my name through my maidservant?" Well, out of that relationship, obviously, there was a lot of jealousy now because there are now two wives in the story, once again, and things become very, very difficult in that relationship. Well, God ended up giving Sarah the baby that he had promised Abraham all along, but now there's this little rivalry between between Isaac and Ishmael, and so Sarah went out of her way to try to fix the problem herself. Well, Sarah's great granddaughter Rachel found herself in a very similar predicament. Rachel was married to Jacob, which was Abraham's grandson, and she was infertile as well. And through her infertility, she decided, you know what, I'm going to have my maidservant have a baby in my honor. Once again, she didn't learn from her grandma's mistakes. And so because of that, she ended up having more children, and she ended up getting a fight with her sister about who could have more babies, and that's never a really good competition to be in, if you know what I'm saying. And so there ended up being a lot of jealousy and rivalry within this family. And so this is important because we have a family lineage who goes out of their way to fix problems on their own accords. This is important because Hannah broke from her family history. She's about to break from her family history in solving infertility with her own ideas and her own schedule and her own power. And why this matters for you and I is this. When people are taunted or pushed into a corner or feeling insecure, people often fall into family habits for dealing with stress. When you find yourself pushed into a corner, feeling stressed out, feeling like you have no power over a situation, you will often fall into family habits of dealing with stress. Think about what your grandpa did and your grandma does and your aunts and uncles do, and those fallings that they have, those temptations and those addictions that they often struggle with are naturally going to be the same crutch that you are probably going to fall on. And so this is going to be significant for Hannah because Hannah found herself in a very similar situation that her family often went outside of God's plans to solve their own infertility. She decided to do something else, and so we want to applaud her for this. And because she did something else, she is going to have something that the other women didn't have before. And so let's learn from Hannah about some of the things that she ended up doing. It says in verse 9, once after a sacrificial meal at Shiloh, Hannah got up and went to pray. Eli, the priest, was sitting in his customary place beside the entrance of the tabernacle. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. And she made this vow, O Lord of heaven's armies, if you look upon my sorrow and answer this prayer to give me a son, then I will give him back to you. He will be yours for an entire lifetime, and as a sign that he has been dedicated to the Lord, his hair will never be cut. Now, this wasn't just a fashion statement that Hannah was proposing here. She was saying that her son would become a Nazirite, someone whose hair would never be cut, someone who would not drink a drop of alcohol, and someone who would not touch anything that was dead. That was a Nazirite vow. And so she says, I will make him a Nazirite and I will dedicate him to you if you give me this one thing. Well, as she was praying to the Lord, Eli watched her. This is the high priest. Seeing her lips moving but hearing no sound, he thought that she had been drinking. This is a little bit of comedy for us today. Must you come in here drunk? He demanded. Throw away your wine. Oh, no, sir, she replied. I haven't been drinking wine or anything stronger, but I am very discouraged, and I was pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think that I am a wicked woman, for I had been praying out of great anguish and sorrow. In that case, Eli said, go in peace. May the God of Israel grant you the request that you have asked for him. So far in this story, we have two dudes. We have a husband who is insensitive, and we have a high priest who is incompetent. This high priest couldn't tell the difference between a drunk woman and someone who was praying. And so he looks at this woman. He couldn't tell that she was in deep anguish. He's an incompetent man in this story. The woman is really the hero of this story. And so she goes and says, I'm not drunk. I'm simply praying. And without knowing the thing that she was praying for, Eli says, oh, then it will be yours. There's some things that we can learn from this story, and as I mentioned at the top of this, I know that many of us here are waiting to hear from God. You're waiting for a job. You're waiting to know what your next step is. You're waiting to know how your relationship is going to evolve. You're waiting for a hole to be filled within your spirit. You're waiting for that healing. You're waiting to hear from God. But the problem is that we can't control how God speaks, but we can control one thing, and this is the big idea that we're going to be wrestling with today. When we need to hear from God, we can only choose how we are going to seek him. And so we're going to be learning 3 things from Hannah in this moment in how she sought God and how God responded on the other side. The first way that Hannah sought God was in her abstaining. She says, I haven't been drinking or anything stronger. I like how she added that in there. I hadn't been drinking wine or anything else, if you know what I'm saying. She paints this picture that she was abstaining in this moment from alcohol. Now, why is this significant within this story? Why was Hannah in Jerusalem in the first place? For the festival, for the party. The one time when everyone gathers together and you're able to see your old friends that you haven't seen in a long time. And, you know, in ancient Israel isn't much different than it is right here on the peninsula. And where there's a party, there's lots of drinking. And Eli knew this. He just assumed that there was another drunk woman who stumbled into the tabernacle and started to pray. But here, she wasn't drinking. Now put yourself in Hannah's shoes for a moment. You are full of pain and you're miserable because your sister wife is having all the children and she's laughing at you every step of the way as you're walking to Jerusalem. Wouldn't that not drive you to drink? Would that not drive you to numb the pain? Would that not drive you to try to mask whatever insecurity you're feeling? It would drive me to drink. But she says, I had not been drinking any wine, or I have not drinking anything stronger. This is important here, because in this moment, we find that Hannah finds herself in abstaining from something that she didn't need, because there's something that she wanted even more. There's something that she wanted even more than to numb the pain. And just think for a moment, if we're able to play a little bit of revisionist history, what if she had been drinking? What if she did have just a little bit of wine or a little bit of, brandy before she went to the temple? What would have happened? She would have said, I hadn't really been drinking, kind of, I guess Eli would have said, get out of here. Get out of here, you drunk woman. And why this is significant is because if she would have masked the pain, she would have missed the miracle. If she would have been in the process of masking the pain with alcohol in this situation, then she would have missed the miracle altogether. Eli would have wrote her off as a drunk. But because she wasn't, Eli gave his voice of confidence, and she was able to leave with a sober mind and a sober body in this situation. Because she abstained from something, because she decided that she wanted something more than simply to mask her hurt, she was able to be a part of a miracle that would change her life and Israel's, or the history of the world forever. There's a warning I want to extend to you today, and it's this: that masking pain is often as addictive as it is temporary. You know this with your painkillers, right? You pop some aspirin, and how long does an aspirin last for? A couple hours. And then what happens? The pain is back. Beware, because masking pain is as addictive as it is temporary. And then what happens if you never actually fix the problem that the aspirin is trying to mask? You need more. And you need more, and you need more, and you need more. And you always need more of that something to mask the pain, even though the pain is not, you're not addressing the pain point. You're just simply finding yourself just masking the problem. We know this with drugs and alcohol and, painkillers. But we also do this similarly with our lies and with our image and with our approval. We simply try to mask the problem. We try to mask the pain with this other stuff. But beware, because pain is as addictive as it is temporary. And so I'm going to challenge us to get today, because if you need to hear from God, I'm going to challenge you to start with abstaining. Start abstaining from something. Start looking and evaluating the things that you are trying to mask your pain with, and start abstaining from those things. Obviously, I'm not saying don't take your doctor's prescription medicine. That is an excuse here. But begin to look at, what are the things that you do to mask your pain? Is it to try to find approval, or maybe trying to, the flirty eye, mask the pain just for a moment? Maybe it's something that we look at, or something that we digest, or maybe even it's a state of mind. But I'm going to challenge us to begin to start abstaining from some of those things, because I don't want you to miss the miracle because you're masking the pain. The second thing that we have that Hannah did is that Hannah sought God in her worship. It said that Hannah got up and went to pray. Now, I know that you know what this feels like. You're in such deep despair and you're in such agony that you don't even want to get out of bed. How many of you guys have been there? Usually it's right before finals week. You know, you're in such pain, you just don't even want to do anything. Have you ever been so emotionally distraught it's hard to get in the shower? Have you ever been in that spot? Sometimes it's just hard to move. And so I love this verse, because it says that in the midst of this dinner, she is full of agony. She got up. Way to go, Hannah. Way to go, just getting up and walking away and deciding to go and to pray. And this is why this is significant. Because worship is the most important response to our weariness. Worship is the most important response to your weariness. I know when we're weary and when we're lifeless and we're apathetic and we're lethargic, all we want to do is just sit in bed and do nothing, lay back, throw it into neutral. But in those moments of weariness, our worship is our most important response. She got up and she went to pray. And because she got up and went to pray, Hannah was known for a lot of cool things in Scripture. In fact, no other woman in the Old Testament is mentioned to going to the Lord's house except for Hannah. Hannah is the only woman who is shown for making and fulfilling a vow to the Lord. Hannah is the only woman who specifically said that she prayed. Hannah's prayer in chapter 2 is also among the longest recorded in the Old Testament. Hannah's prayer includes the most recorded utterances of Yahweh's name, which is the proper name of God, by a woman, which is 18 times. Hannah is shown avoiding the faults of her first infertility covenant woman by seeking help from Yahweh rather than pursuing crafty schemes. Hannah, because she got up and because she prayed, she holds a lot of Guinness Book of World Records for women in the Old Testament. She got up and she worshipped when she was weary. Some of you guys, you're looking for that answer from God. You can't control how God is going to respond, but you can control how you're going to seek Him. And so get up and worship in our weariness. The last thing that we can learn from Hannah is this, that she sought God in her honesty. I'm very discouraged. I was pouring my heart out to the Lord. I'm in great anguish and great sorrow. I love that Hannah was feeling the feels as they were happening. She wasn't trying to mask the way that she was feeling. She knew exactly where she was in the situation, even though she couldn't control her outcome. This is a good reminder for us, because in this pain, after she's in this place of pain, she's in this place of anguish, and she goes and she prays to God. But there's going to be an answer. There's going to be a miracle. And maybe it's an encouragement to you. Maybe it's a warning sign for you. Maybe it's discouraging for you, depending on where you're coming from. But out of this situation, this is what I see. The answers that can only come from God are often on the other side of a pain that no one wants to experience. The answer that you're looking for, the thing that you say, only God can answer this request. Only God can bring me here. Only God can do this. Oftentimes, those answers are on the other side of a valley that you have to trudge through, that you have to get up and worship through and walk through and abstain through. Those answers are on the other side of those things. She was in a moment of honesty, knowing that she was in pain and in anguish. But sometimes the answers that only God can answer are on the other side of a pain, or a place of pain that no one wants to experience. And so we decide, you know what? Pain's right there. I'm going to chill right here, even though the answer's over there. And you know what? I'm just going to let myself just hang out here for a little bit. And we find ourselves in this in-between place. We find ourselves in this place of inaction. We find ourselves in this place of not allowing God to fulfill the things that He begun, to answer the the desires of your heart that you've had since you were a child. We don't allow him to bring it to full effect because we just simply put ourselves on the sideline. She sought God in her abstinence, in her worship, in her honesty. And then Eli said, whatever it is, you're good. Picking up in verse 19, it says the entire family got up early the next morning and they went to worship the Lord once more. They returned home to Ramah. When Elkanah slept with Hannah, the Lord remembered her plea. And in due time she gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, I asked the Lord for him. Did you catch that? It said that it said that the entire family got up and went to the festival. The entire family. Does that mean that Hannah reconciled at this moment? Or maybe, I imagine, the other sister wife, didn't relent in her gossip and her anger. Maybe at this moment she just cared a little bit less because she now had a promise from God that she could hold on to. And then it says that when they got home, the Lord remembered her. And then she ended up having a son and named him Samuel. The Lord remembered. Oftentimes when we are looking to hear from God, obviously some of us are looking to hear a voice. But Hannah never heard a voice from God. We don't have a recording of him ever saying, you will have a son. But God spoke, and this boy named Samuel. So today, some of us are in this place and we're looking for God to answer, and God answers in different ways. Sometimes he moves our hearts. Sometimes he gives us an impression on our spirit. Sometimes when we open our Bible, he ends up speaking to us through that thing too. God speaks to us through a lot of different ways. And in this case, Hannah was remembered, and she ended up getting the thing that she was praying for. As Evie's going to come up here and close out this time, I want to encourage you guys with this, because this series really isn't about Hannah. But without Hannah, the series that we're in couldn't have happened. And this is my charge for you as dads and moms and people in this place, is that the boy who heard God had a parent who sought God. We're going to be learning about Samuel, a boy who heard God. But Samuel had a parent who sought God. I don't know if you have a praying grandma or a praying mom, but that holds a lot of weight in your spiritual walk. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're the first line, you're the first generation of Christians within your family, to which the onus and the responsibility of seeking after God is all the more important. Because the boy who sought God had a parent, or the boy who heard God had a parent who sought God. This goes back to Jesus' sowing and reaping principle. You reap what you do not sow, and you sow what you're not going to reap. But that is the beautiful canvas and lineage of God's family.